So I made the same kind of video over a year ago about medicine ball throws. My arguments in favor of the Olympic lifts are going to remain the exact same, and I don't expect anyone to go back and find that older video, so I'll restate those arguments again. And if you followed me for long enough, you probably can already just predict what I'm going to say about them. But jumping is not more specific to sports than the Olympic lifts, and I'm talking about in its entirety. I'm talking about the stimulus placed on the body, and the physical demands and requirements to successfully complete a repetitive Olympic lift compared to jumping. The jumping in training, if it's not a jump in response to completing a task, is not more specific to sport than the Olympic lifts. Counter movement jumps, seated jumps, consecutive hurdle jumps, you name it, you know what jumping looks like in training. Rarely, if ever, does one jump in sports in which the goal is to jump as high as possible, where they can self-select the depth of their counter movement, where they can use an advantageous arm swing, or whatever else entails them to jumping their highest or furthest. Obviously, I think jumping in training is good, and pretty much everybody should be doing it. But if you were to make jumping in training specific to sports, you would likely need a pre-jump and a post-jump action. Meaning you would need some sort of approach into your jump, with that approach varying in speed, varying in angle, varying in movement pattern, whether you're sidestepping, jogging, shuffling, backpedaling before the jump. You would need some sort of read. And the post jump would likely be some sort of acceleration or change of direction, and would likely also be indicated based on a read. I like basketball, so thinking about the different ways high effort jumping occurs in basketball, there's layups or dunk attempts, there's defending layups and dunk attempts, there's rebounding, there's jumping a passing lane on some sort of skip pass across the court, there's defending a jump shot. That's pretty much it. And all of these jumps occur with some sort of pre-jump and post-jump action. And most of the time, you're not jumping as high as possible, because there's angles involved, there's timing involved, it's reliant on the OODA loop, which is observe, orient, decide, and act. These are the contributing factors that lead to jump outcomes. So the following are ways in which Olympic lifts relate to sports that jumping doesn't. Creating propulsion onto an external body of mass and having to manage a collision with that same body of mass within milliseconds and redirect it upon that collision. This doesn't occur in jump training because there is no external mass unless you're doing loaded jumps, but even when you're doing loaded jumps, load stays in a fixed position, meaning it's really just an extension of your own mass. Olympic lifts involve rapidly falling, rapidly dropping your center of mass to gain better leverage onto that external body of mass that you're interacting with. When you jump, you're just falling as fast as gravity lets you. Olympic lifts involve going from peak extension to peak flexion as fast as possible, getting into end ranges of various joints as fast as possible, and stabilizing a load in those end ranges. Creating 2 to 3 distinct acceleration phases or impulses into an organized movement task. Most jumps involve just one acceleration phase as you preload with your counter movement and then accelerate until toe off. And it's funny because I'll make these arguments and people will respond with a non sequitur like, well, if Olympic lifts made the best athletes, then the best Olympic lifters would be the best football players. Or they'll say something like, the best weightlifters on any team are never the best players. This is of course a ridiculous argument and could be said about elite sprinters or elite athletes in any domain. Jumping is great, and it's really great at training for outputs and ground contact time. You can incorporate elements into jump training that incorporates the perception action coupling to make it more sport-like, which is good. But in reality, most jump training lacks any of the things that make Olympic lifting compelling and noteworthy. Obvious bottom line here is that you should do both, but avoid arguing that jumping is better for athletes due to its specificity, or arguing along the lines that athletes jump in sports but they don't move a barbell in sports. Those are ridiculous arguments and not compelling, but that's all I have for the video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.